Three generations of Buffetts are with me. Warren Buffett is the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway and a longtime friend of mine and this program. His genius as an investor has made him one of the world's wealthiest men. He pledged to give away most of his fortune and donated $31 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2006. He's also encouraged his children to engage in philanthropy. Warren Buffett's son, Howard Graham, is the chairman and CEO of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. He's also the author of a new book. It is called 40 Chances, Finding Hope in a Hungry World. His son, Howard Warren Buffett, is a lecturer at Columbia University and a trustee of his father's foundation. He has contributed to the book with his own experiences in policymaking and philanthropy. So I'm pleased to have all of them here together at this table for the first time. Grandfather, son, and grandson. So how does it feel here?
It feels great.
It really does, doesn't
yeah.
it? You know?
Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
You talk about that in your introductory remarks. So let me just start with the book. Clearly, because I knew your mother and understood how what's involved here is what you have learned, but also what you learned in addition from them. Give me a sense of what it was that you were trying to accomplish with 40 Chances.
Well, you know, both my mom and dad were phenomenal in terms of the opportunity they've given me and my brother and sister. And in my case, I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, met a lot of people, seen a lot of things. And I just felt that, you know, those experiences are something that hopefully are worth sharing. I start out with the idea of doing a textbook, and Howie told me, he says, Dad, you have to think a little bigger than that. So I just thought that, you know, sharing some of the experiences, and you know, we've tried a lot of different things, and we've failed at more than we've succeeded, and I just feel like that's an important message.
You can learn from failure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why the title 40 Chances?
Well, I was going to something that most of your viewers will not get too excited about. It's called Planter's School, and it's you go in the wintertime, you go to the John Deere dealership and sit down, and different speakers will try to tell you how to improve how you do in the crop, and you know, he kind of talked about how you only really have 40 seasons, 40 growing seasons to do the best job you can, and I kind of then translated that into thinking about, well, you really have about 40 really prime years. I always joke and say he has 80. But,
yeah,
you know,
no,
but
he missed that.
Yeah, but you know, a little the ever-ready battery. But you know, the truth is, most people have, you know, in their prime, they have about 40 years to really change things or achieve their goals or whatever it is they want to set their sights on.
You still consider yourself first and foremost a farmer?
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I would never want to give it up.
When you were last here and we talked with Warren, you said you were in the middle of a transition to impact decision makers more effectively. Is this book the culmination of that?
The book is a big part of that. Yeah, I learned a lesson, particularly working in conflict areas and areas where you really have to have government engagement. That, you know, if you don't impact policy. You know, if you're working, you can have great people, but if they're working under really poor policy, they're not going to succeed. So we really started to embrace advocacy as part of our tool.
Yeah, and you believe that we can do a significantly better job at trying to eliminate poverty.
Absolutely. I think one of the things is we've been living too much in history, and you know, technology has changed, but also I think thinking has to change, and thinking is changing. I mean, you know, the younger people in philanthropy today think differently. They're more innovative. I think they're more focused, and those people that are thinking and driving that way, I think, have to help change some of the bigger organizations.
I'm amused at what Warren once said, that it's much better if you give away your money while you can make the decisions before you're 90 and drooling with a blonde sitting on your lap.
Right. I might like to try that, though, too. I think I got the drooling part now. Where's the blonde?
There is also your mom, and as everyone, I think, knows, we did a wonderful conversation with her before she died, and here is an excerpt of that in which we see her and her impact on the family. Here it is.
I think he hopes that people remember how much he liked to talk about the ovarian lottery. He loves that, and I believe that so deeply, like he does. And if we can make young people realize, I'm lucky I was just born here, and then take it a step further, and what can I do for people that aren't so lucky, including people here, I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think that would make a big difference. I know that means a lot to him.
So you say this, Warren, in the introduction. In this ovarian lottery, my children received some lucky tickets. Many people who experience such good fortune react by simply enjoying their position in life and trying to ensure that their children enjoy similar benefits. This approach is understandable, though it can become distasteful when if it's accompanied by smug, if I can do it, why can't everyone else attitude. Emphasize or help us understand the significance of the ovarian lottery, because it says something about how lucky we are to be born in this country.
Sure, Charlie, I was born in this country, and the odds were 30 or 40 to 1 against it when I was born in 1930. If I'd been born someplace else, my life would have been nothing like it's been here.
You wouldn't be allocating capital.
If I were wandering around in Bangladesh saying I allocate capital, I say get a job, buddy. You know.
I would sign up. Allocate
you know,
capital.
I was fortunate with my parents. I was fortunate at the time I was born. I happen to be wired in a way that works very well in a big capitalistic system. So I've had all kinds of good luck. Right. It could have been, dramatically different.
But millions of other people haven't had that.
Absolutely.
And did not benefit from the ovarian lottery.
Obama got a certain amount of criticism when he said, nobody did this alone. Well, I don't know about other people. I did not do it alone. I mean, there are 10,000 crosses over there at Normandy that enabled me to be where I am today. They're people at Gettysburg. I mean, none of us do it alone, and I've been very, very lucky to be sort of designed for this time and this place. But a lot of people aren't lucky, and the market system showers things on me, and it leaves an awful lot of people behind.
I should take note of the fact that son and grandson are named Howard.
Yeah.
Your dad was named Howard as well. Yeah. You're a hero in life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The idea is that you can do what? If our goal is to eliminate poverty to a large extent, what's the steps that we ought to take? And I'll bring in your son in a moment.
Yeah, I think part of what I tried to write in the book is use our experiences to talk about some of those answers. I think when philosophy kind of clashes with reality, which is what we've seen in our Congress recently, reality, those people in living reality kind of lose. And so, we need to have more serious leadership in terms of addressing this issue. So when people talk about cutting the SNAP program, those people don't suffer the consequences from that action, and they need to understand who does suffer those consequences. So really, awareness and advocacy are a key thing in terms of the policy. And then, another thing we need to do is I always say, historically, business has been kind of the bad guy, and in philanthropy, people have looked at it and said, well, I can't. They're doing this or they're doing something, so I can't really partner with them. The truth is, businesses create jobs, and jobs are what permanently bring people out of poverty. Now, it's not that simple in a lot of cases, but we have to have a different mindset about what some of the solutions are.
Tell me about you and what you've learned and your role in this book.
Well, I'm just honored to be involved, and over the last 15 years, I've been able to travel with my dad around the world and take in so many experiences, and that's part of what we've tried to capture in 40 Chances. But for me growing up, I have had the two most incredible role models anyone could ask for, and we sit around at Dairy Queen at family brunch and have conversations, but they're still unbelievable individuals. My grandfather built what was one of the world's greatest fortunes and turned it into one of history's greatest gifts. And in doing that, he empowered my dad to try and change the world. And that opportunity is what my dad has used and shared with me to try and improve lives everywhere.
Tell me about your visit to Prague in 1969.
Yeah, that was a big change in my life, and one of the best things I ever did. And I wouldn't have gotten it done if it wasn't for my dad, because my mother did not want me to go, and I still were arguing and arguing.
At the time.
Yeah, I mean, I had no concept of what was going on in Prague. I just know that Vera, who had stayed with us as an exchange student, said, "Come on over." So I said, "I want to go over," and I'm flying in. It's one of those cases where the mood changes quite quickly, because I'm flying in and I'm looking at, I love big machines, and you're landing and you've got all these tanks and all this stuff. This is really cool. And then when I'm standing face to face with the soldier who's looking for my visa, I'm going, well, this is not so cool. And so, but I learned so much. I didn't get 3 meals a day. We boiled hot water on Sundays to take a bath. I mean, it was just so different. And you saw people who were subdued, people who were beat up by secret police. I mean, I saw all this, and to see it is different than reading a book. And so it really changed. It was the first time I felt helpless, and that I felt like I really should be doing something, but I can't do anything. And I think, later on in life, that really stuck with me.
What is it that makes you proud?
Well, I'm proud of all three of my children, but they don't have to do what they're doing. I mean, they don't have unbelievable amounts of money, but they have enough so they could spend their time in a country club or something of the sort. And instead, Howie, I don't know how many countries he's been in, but he's trying to help his fellow human being. And fortunately, I've got some money that can help him do that. But the energy and the imagination and learning from mistakes and all of that belongs to him.
One other thing you have, other than this sort of instinct for farming and agriculture and experience and learning, is photography. And we're going to see a couple of things here, several things. Tell me, your wife introduced you to cameras, yes? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what did it do for you? What did it turn you into?
I think for one thing, the first thing she would tell you is it taught me some patience. If you want to get a cheetah on a kill, you have to wait.
Exactly.
So, and
cheetahs are not about waiting for you.
No, that's exactly right. There's no remote control that you get so it did. It taught me some patience. But I started seeing things, on the farm originally that I just kind of wanted to capture. And then when I started traveling, and originally we did a lot in conservation, so it was a lot of fun. Elephants and cheetahs and lions and all those things that kids like to see and we all love. But then I learned that photography is a really powerful tool to change people's minds, to make them. You can't, if you get a strong enough photograph, people can't turn away from it. You can't deny that it's happening. And so to me, I think I write it in the book, if I remember right, that it's like a truth gun. I mean, it's just, it really forces people to deal with the reality.
As somebody said, effectively, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, take a look at some of these. This is I want you to describe the photograph. Okay. This is a emaciated veteran saluting a flag.
Yeah, this is Everett. This is Everett in West Virginia. Everett was one of those circumstances where I had not gone to, really photograph Everett, but we saw him. He came out to get his mail, and I saw his ribs and knew he was malnourished. And so we turned around and went back. And that picture is really interesting because I was on the other side of a very busy road waiting to cross. My colleague had already gone up. She's standing at the bottom of the stairs there. And I yelled across the street. I said, ask Everett if he's a veteran, because he had the flag. And immediately what he did was he saluted. And then we spent quite a bit of time talking to him. But he's an example of somebody who served this country and hasn't been treated fairly.
Here's a picture of a boy you photographed in Senegal who's in chains. What's his story? This
is where my camera almost got me in a lot of trouble. We got in. I was able to take one camera. It was amazing. We got into this area. There was about 40 to 50 young boys in shackles and chains, and they basically are caught in a religious system that their parents give a child to the marabout, who is the head of the religion there, and basically those children beg for money. If they don't get enough money on the street, then they're treated like this.
Okay, the third slide is a picture of a woman in Armenia. 82-year-old Anna.
This is Anna. I think Howie should tell you this story.
Well, we had been driving through the countryside in Armenia for hours at this point, and I think almost by happenstance we stopped at this house and we were invited in by Anna, and she told her story about her sister who was mentally ill, that she had to lock up at night because her sister tried to kill her. And what you're seeing is you're seeing her standing in both her kitchen and her bedroom and her porch all at once there. And it was one time that I had an incredible difficulty with it, because whatever it was about the situation, it hit me so hard emotionally. And my dad and I have seen indescribable instances around the world, and Anna's story just touched me in a way I was not expecting.
Sure, if I could just add really quickly, I told Howie, we're in South Africa, and I said, on the way home, we're going to go to Armenia. And he says, Dad, I don't want to go to Armenia. What's in Armenia? And he really didn't want to go. And I said, I just was there.
That's why Gene coming out there.
And
I said,
no. Skipped a generation, did it?
Yeah, he did. And I said, you're going to see something you've never seen. I've taken him to Bangladesh and India and all over Africa and Central America. And what I wanted him to see was a society that when you talk to people, this was a situation where people had good jobs. We talked to professors who were out of work. They've lost cars, they've lost houses, they can't send their kids to school anymore. It's a very different environment than what we see in a lot of the countries we work. And I wanted him to have that experience.
I think that's been one of the things that Bill and Melinda Gates have done, is to travel and firsthand experience with their own eyes and their own, visit.
Yeah. You can't sit in a building on Park Avenue and really understand this.
Yeah. You believe, what ought to be the debate about philanthropy now? Because the Giving Pledge has elicited some of that, people stepping forward. Mm-hmm. And they're having meetings as part of that in which they try to understand how to give more effectively. But do we need a bigger debate about philanthropy and how it can be applied and why you should be engaged?
Yeah, well, philanthropy does not operate with a market system. I mean, when we sell dilly bars at Dairy Queen, we soon learn whether people like dilly bars. The market system is wonderful in terms of the feedback it gives you on ideas and products and all of that. And philanthropy, if you're handing money to people, they're going to say keep handing it one way or another, and they'll flatter you and do all kinds of things. So you do not have a market system test, and that makes it much more difficult. And you can do the wrong thing for a long time, and nothing will stop it. So it requires more ability than business.
Do we have it requires more ability to give money away than make it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, there's no comparison.
Yeah. In fact, that's why you gave the money to Bill and Melinda Gates, because you
and the children
because you were admiring of the fact that you could be effective.
The energy they would bring to it, the intelligence, the lifelong commitment. I mean, that's important.
So, what's your role at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation?
Writing checks. Well, actually, sending over stock certificates. I just endorse them. But that's the same role I have with my children.
But it's more than that. I mean, you have a sense of wanting to inspire.
Well, but I wouldn't have joined with them if they didn't have the same goals. Their philanthropy is grounded around the proposition that every life has equal value. My children believe the same thing, and they're young and they're willing to devote the rest of their lives to it, just as my children are doing. So I've got these people working for me that do it far better than I would do it, and I happen to love what I do. Exactly. And fortunately, that tends to increase the amount of resources available for philanthropy.
You're still tiptoeing to work, are you?
No, tap dancing. Tap dancing to work. Yeah. I'm doing handsprings now.
Anyway. The Rockefeller Foundation was famous for the Green Revolution and its support of that. Are you think that something like that in agriculture?
I think today we're where I call it the brown revolution. We've got to start protecting our natural resources, and soil is the key. I mean, you can't, it's like, if you want to go somewhere in a car, you got to put gasoline in it or diesel fuel. You have to have soil to grow anything, and we've not done a good job of recognizing it's not sexy. Soil isn't sexy, so people don't think about it. But we've got
Bill Gates think it's sexy.
Well, I gave Bill this book called Dirt. I told him, I said read this, and you'll understand why soil's more important. But
fertilizer too.
Yeah, and it's a challenge because it's not what everybody thinks about. But we do have to pay more attention to how we're treating our natural resources, and we want to be able to farm the way we farm in 100 years, and then we've got to do it.
I want him one more time because she was such a part of the shaping of three of you. I mean, you said to me about Susie, that you once said to me, you've got to meet her because I was a mess before I met her.
That is true. That is true.
This conversation took place not soon, not later, soon after this. She passed away. But here is her reflecting on the family and the values.
I think that's what made Warren a Democrat. I take the credit for that. Because both our parents were Republicans, and we are not. And he would go with me to hear speakers, Jesse Jackson and the man who wrote Black Like Me, and Lewis. And he would go with me to hear, Al Lowenstein. We loved him. So without knowing it, step by step, I was infiltrating. Yeah. And he's very much, I find this a profound thing. I was talking to him one day about some racial issue, and he looked at me, and this Charlie would have been 40 years ago. And he said to me, wait till women discover they're the slaves of the world. Now, how many men were cognizant of that, and even women then?
Wow. Prophetic, huh?
Charlie, I went back and watched that interview before I wrote this book.
Yeah. And it's throughout the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
I should point out, she's just recovering from throat cancer,
That's right.
and
that time. Right.
affected her voice.
And this was June 2004. Let me talk about the world that you see now politically. We just went through a crisis in Washington.
Hey, Washington created crisis.
It was created by demanding certain things before they would support not only a rise in the debt ceiling, but also some other budgetary items. What is this doing, you think, to the image around the world and people who either hold treasuries or B, have looked to America for economic strength?
Yeah. Well, I've told my children, and I think it's in the book, that you spend 20 years building a reputation, you can destroy it in 20 minutes. Well, the United States has spent 237 years building a reputation, and that's why we've become the world's reserve currency, and people trust our full faith and credit. And for a Congress to threaten to destroy what took 237 years to build is just, it's totally irresponsible. The debt ceiling, it shouldn't exist. I mean, the way to have a ceiling on your debt is to not spend more than...
So in other words, the idea of a debt ceiling and negotiating over it is nuts.
But once you have it, if you're going to have it, it can't be used. I mean, we have nuclear weapons, but we're not going to use them. Even if we get disappointed with other people, we don't say because this isn't happening the way we want it, we're going to use a nuclear weapon. The debt ceiling is a political weapon of mass destruction, and both parties should say it is off the table. We can argue about abortion, we can argue about immigration, we can argue about food stamps, whatever it may be, but we're not going to tie that to a threat to destroy a reputation that the United States has built up over 237 years. So I would ask both political parties to say it is off the table.
Do you think it's more likely that they will be listening because of the close call we had here?
I think maybe. I always have hope in humans, and actually Senator McConnell, who I don't agree with on many things, but he has introduced in the past, I believe, something that at least it will reduce the chance that the debt ceiling will be used as a weapon, and it should be eliminated entirely. But if that's the best we can do politically, more power to him.
The thought would have been a weapon of mass destruction.
It would just been plain stupid. It would, it would be like using poison gas or something. I mean, just because you weren't getting your own way. It is not something to be used as a weapon.
Okay, so now you have Democrats and Republicans, and you have a commission. Patty Murray and Paul Ryan are sort of chairing it.
Yeah.
And they've got until...
And I think they're good people.
And they're good people. And they've got until... And they know something about budgeting because they're chairman of the respective committees. You now have until December 13th. Should they use Simpson Bowles as a starting point?
Well, I think they can use that or something like it. I mean, their goal ought to be to get a lot done.
Okay, and so what should they try to get done? Help them understand what a Buffett recommendation would be.
Well, they're not going to get 535 people on board, but they should do as much as they can toward both raising revenues where it won't hurt the economy and I think looking at certain aspects of entitlement. If they want a means test my Social Security, I'm all for it.
And extend the age, too?
Yeah, probably. You can't look at one part of a program without looking at the whole program. But if they come up with a program that I'm 80% in agreement with, I will cheer them on. I mean, nobody's going to be 100% in agreement. And that's their job. I mean, whether within this time frame they can get it done. Maybe it'll help get it done, what's happened up till now. But the job of the Congress, is not to be putting up debt ceilings, shutting down governments, doing things like that. The job of the government...
But they've got to find a budget now, and they've got to do that so that they don't have the debt ceiling crisis they had before.
But the first thing I would do if I were Patty Murray and Ryan, Paul Ryan, is I would say, on behalf of our respective parties, we are calling for absolutely taking the debt ceiling out of any future discussions that tie up with anything else. And I would say we both sinned in the past. I would not get into this finger-pointing stuff or anything of the sort. It doesn't make any difference who used it in the past. It is an inappropriate instrument to use.
And you would say to Democrats, we have to reform entitlement.
We sure have to do certain
because
things.
there's an article you saw in the Wall Street Journal a day or two ago saying, so liberal in the Democratic Party saying no messing around with entitlement.
Yeah, well, if
and
you
the
both take an
Republicans are
absolute,
saying no cut taxes. As long as you have those two
and
positions.
it certainly worked wonderfully so far, hasn't it, taking that approach. Now, I would say this, to the extent it could be done, if I were Murray and Ryan, I would try to do this in private and come out with something of a package, because I think if you take it one by one, nobody wants to give on the individual points. So it's an enormous problem to have a debate in public when people are facing primaries in not that many months, and that's what they're worried about. So I would try to come out with something close to a package that everybody disliked a little bit, but that overall we felt was good for the country.
So what is it you dislike that you'd be willing to see in the package?
Oh, I think we have to make certain judgments about entitlements. I think we have to make certain judgments about taxes. But how it's, if you can't really talk about one part of the package without looking at the whole package. That's why I'd like to see him come out with the whole thing.
But let me just understand this too. I mean, when you talk about we need to increase revenue, obviously we do. You mean more than simply reducing deductions. You mean increasing rates.
Yeah, no, the revenue has to go up to 18.5% or so of GDP.
Because that's where we've shown that
expenses have to come down.
Effectively, that's the place it ought to be, 8.5% of GDP.
Yeah, the expenses should be 20.5 or 21. We can take a 2.5% gap without GDP going up, without the debt going up as a percentage of GDP. There's nothing wrong with that. I've operated in a world like that, since World War II ended. It works, but it's not impossible. We're richer than we've ever been. We're absolutely, $50,000 of GDP per person. I mean, we are way richer than when I was working 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. So the problem isn't that the country's become poor. The problem is that we've overpromised, and we are unwilling in some cases to raise the revenues to meet some of the promises that we probably should have.
$50,000 means that when you compare our per individual,
it's 6 times what it was when I was born,
and it's $50,000 or thereabouts. And in China, it's what, 7 or 8,000?
Yeah, maybe a little less than that.
Maybe even 4 or 5.
Yeah, no, we are the richest family on earth. Imagine when my dad was in the waiting room in 1930, and somebody said to him, "Your son is going to live to when the average is 6 times per capita what it is today." My dad would have thought it would be utopia. I mean, it's unbelievable what we've achieved in terms of learning how to turn out stuff. In terms of how do we handle the stuff we turn out, we're lagging a little bit.
Oh, and to say that your son will have an income and a wealth larger than a number of countries too.
Oh, things will. This country has a wonderful future, Charlie. And incidentally, 535 people can't screw it up. They may look like they're trying sometimes, but they can't. They can't stop 315 million Americans. I mean, America works, but it has certainly gotten gummed up, in recent months.
But do the Chinese and people-owned treasuries have somewhere else to go?
No. And America will pay its bills. I mean, the full faith of credit is still intact in the United States. I mean, I think enough people have learned something from going up to the brink that we're going to. It should just be ruled out entirely. Why worry about something that isn't going to happen? Why cause millions of people to worry about something that the 535 would be crazy and won't happen? And that doesn't make any sense. If I would say something on this show that I know isn't going to happen, and it cause worry for tens of millions of people, that's irresponsible.
And the idea was that they're going to be able to defund Medicare, for example, in the budget, Obamacare.
Yeah, they could say they want a new post office, in Elmore. I'm not going to vote for this thing. I mean, it's crazy.
But there's also this argument, and tell me how you see it, because we have deficit hawks who talk about long-term debt that this country faces, and you have Larry Summers and others who are arguing that what we need to do is focus on growth, and that the growth we'll have will enable us to pay off the debt because that is not an immediate need, and the immediate need is growth. Do you agree with Larry Summers on this?
We're having growth, and we're going to continue to have growth.
But we need growth to meet the challenge of being...
But we should not increase our debt over time at a rate that's faster than our growth. I mean, we can handle the debt we have. We can handle the debt we have relative to our current output. But we can't keep getting have debt grow at a rate that's faster than output. Eventually, that catches up with you.
What is an appropriate rate of debt to GDP?
Nobody knows exactly, but certainly
what do you think?
Our net debt, people talk about close to 17 trillion, but our net debt, knock 4 trillion off that. Our net debt is 70-odd% of GDP. We came out of World War II with, I think, close to 120%. I may be off a little bit on that. So nobody knows a magic level, but you don't press it to the ultimate. I mean, and if we stay at 72% or whatever it may be at the net debt to GDP, that's perfectly okay. It got down into the 30s not that many years ago, starting from that 120. But we're fine. But it's a trend that should not continue.
How do you feel about sequestration?
Well, again, that gets into the, that sort of gets into the games that people play. I would just like them to focus on what this country needs, what they can do for the 315 million people. They're not all going to agree. If they get a budget and you like 80% of it and I like 80%, it won't be exactly the same 80%, but we'll feel okay. We'll feel a lot better than having them play the games they've been playing the last few months.
But do you have a sense, and I think you said yes, that there may very well, because of what Mitch McConnell has said and that others have stepped forward to say we cannot let this happen again. We can't just kick the can down the road.
It should be taken off. We used the atomic bomb twice in 1945. We've faced all kinds of things since then. The Soviets have faced all kinds of things that really irritated them, that they wanted to change in a big way. They did not drop nuclear bombs. And this is a nuclear weapon of a financial sort, and it does not belong in the repertoire of either party.
You believe we learned the lessons that caused the crash in 2008?
Well, we learned that bubbles will happen, and when you get one in housing, it can be a very big bubble. People may get smarter in some respects. When it comes to fear and greed, I don't think they'll change in the next few centuries anyway. I'll let you carry it out beyond that.
But interestingly, we just had a Nobel Prize in Economics awarded, and one man, Fahmy, believes that the markets can be ordered and that they're
efficient.
They're efficient.
Yeah.
The other, Schiller says no, they're irrational and we'll have more bubbles.
Yeah.
Where do you come down on
Well,
that?
the markets are generally quite efficient, but they are not efficient. And I think probably Professor Palmer would say that.
Yeah.
Schiller is right that we will have more bubbles.
Yeah.
This was a particularly extreme one because it involved the biggest asset class in the country, that almost everybody had housing. And it also was leveraged to the hilt in many cases. People had refinanced their houses and everything. So you had a huge asset class margin to the hilt. And when that asset class fell in price, it hit tens of millions of people and financial institutions all over the world that lent based on it. It was designed to be a huge, huge crash, and we got it.
And do you think we've learned the lesson?
We've learned a lesson about that kind of bubble.
Yeah, and will Dodd-Frank help us next time?
I'm not sure.
You don't think they've done the job that was necessary with Dodd-Frank in terms of creating a regulatory structure that may be both a warning and preventing people from doing the kind of behavior that got them into trouble in the first place?
Fear and greed are pretty hard to control.
Fear and greed triumphs over regulation.
After 1929, we spent 2 or 3 years. We had the SEC, we had deposit insurance, we did all these things looking at 1929. And we got 2008. I don't think humans will ever behave in a way where you don't get mass fear from time to time.
One interesting thing is that Tim Geithner is now having some speeches and private conversations, who said we could not have done what we did, Bernanke, Paulson, and me, without the emergency powers that we were given to use by the Congress. And then some people in the present debate want to stop that kind of power.
Well, that's the point. If you look at Dodd-Frank, I haven't read all 20, however many pages there are, but Bernanke used something called Section 13.3. Right. I had a Federal Reserve chairman, I won't tell you which one, who told me once, he said, under 13.3, we can do anything. And the truth is, we had to do almost anything then. And Hank Paulson had something called the Emergency Stabilization Fund. It was set up when they changed the price of gold back in 1930. That's the thing he used to guarantee money market funds. Nobody ever thought it was designed for that. But they did it. You know, and who's going to stop them? I don't know whether the Emergency Stabilization Fund allows, but that you had men there who would act and who had these authorities, and to some extent, I believe I may be wrong on this. That Dodd-Frank circumscribed some of those abilities that the Fed and the Treasury had, and believe me, they were important last time.
And they clearly say so. Yeah. There's also this J.P. Morgan and a $13 billion settlement. What do you think of that? I mean, was that appropriate? Was it the right amount? Will it serve to send a signal?
I don't know what the right amount is, but I know this. When a prosecutor tells you that a financial institution, I think we got fined $290 million when I was at Solomon. I had no negotiating power. Believe me, if they brought a criminal action against us, we were out of business the next day, and that would have led to a lot of consequences. So you really have no negotiation. You're like a wolf bearing your throat. I mean, basically, if you're dealing in that kind of a situation. And I don't know where the numbers come from. I do know that in my own view, punishing J.P. Morgan for anything that happened in connection with Bear Stearns or WAMO, I think is a terrible mistake. I mean, maybe Jamie didn't get an indemnification agreement on Bear Stearns, but he was stepping forward at a time that the government wanted him to step forward. And same way with WAMO.
So you think it was unfair?
Yeah, I think if it relates to any of that, I think it's unfair. I really do.
I think they will argue that it was more than that, but I mean,
well, there was more than that probably, but they have referenced. I think they've referenced the sins of Bear Stearns and WAMU in coming up with the number, and I don't think anybody in government was hoping that J.P. Morgan was going to walk away from Bear Stearns or WAMU. And I think they probably could have gotten an indemnification agreement if they'd wanted to, take risks with the whole economy in terms of keeping the negotiations going. But they were asked to act in a very, very quick manner, and they did, and maybe they're getting punished for it now. I think I'll put it this way: I think the system is better off because Jamie Dimon has been running J.P. Morgan straight through from 2008.
Can you say that because?
I think the guy has been a leader.
Because the decisions he's made
and
building the biggest bank in America?
Yeah, and when Bear Stearns was going down, he was there. And when WAMU was going down, he was there. And those were important decisions, not just in terms of those institutions, but what they said to the rest of the world, that somebody is stepping up.
Who pays for this? $13 billion.
The shareholders pay for it. And of course, they aren't even the shareholders who were around in the past. That's the nature of it. But,
And if J.P. Morgan is today, two other banks you have an investment in, Bank of America and Wells Fargo, might also be at risk.
They've written big checks already. And the truth is that if your regulator comes around to you and you hold licenses in all these states and maybe with your security, you do what they say. You put up the best argument you can, but you do what they say.
Well, according to what we have read, Jamie very much wanted them to also forego any criminal possibilities, and they refused to do that.
Yeah.
So the criminal possibility
still is out there.
there.
I don't think it'll happen.
No,
but I don't know. But
if you didn't think it was going to happen,
I would not like running a financial institution with the threat of a criminal action against it. I did it one time.
Yeah, Salomon Brothers.
I did it, and every day you wake up wondering whether the plug will be pulled.
When you look at what they did and in terms of the future, J.P. Morgan can absorb this.
They can absorb $13 billion. That's why they got asked for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the exact same actions had happened at a place that couldn't have afforded $13 billion, they wouldn't do that. No.
Yeah.
No.
Do you think too big to fail is still with us and should be with us?
I think I think it's, but too big to be punished should the people that were active participants have walked away rich. It's the shareholders of those institutions that paid. Right, I mean, the shareholders of AIG paid. They didn't have anything to do with the actions of AIG Financial Products. The people that Citi lost a very significant percentage of their net worth that owned the stock. I think that if you run a major financial institution and you need the help of the government, you and your spouse should go away broke. I mean, all kinds of other people end up getting broke in these things.
That's not what happened.
No, that's not what happened. And
so how would you correct that?
Well, let me write I could write a statute if you gave me a little time.
What would it say?
Well, it would say that have to be more drafted by somebody who knows more about it than I do. But essentially, I would not let any huge financial institution who's so important to the functioning of the United States that they had to go to the government and get saved. I would make sure that the CEO that led to that and his spouse walked away broke, and I would say that the directors should at least have to refund everything they've earned in the previous 5 years or so. If that were there, I think you'd have more attention going in. You know, you can say the downside to some guy that's got $500 million and maybe $100 million of his stock, but that isn't, you know, that's not real. It's the shareholders that pay for it, and it's society that pays for it. So, if you want to change human behavior, I think you change the penalty that happens to the humans whose behavior counts in that situation.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about financial loss to these people, and they should go broke, and they shouldn't profit from the decisions they made that ruin the lives and fortunes of a lot of other people.
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should they go to prison?
That depends on what they did, but I don't rule it out.
Did things that justified going to prison? You know more about this than most people.
Yeah, that's hard to say, Charlie. I don't know the answer to that, but it's not inconceivable to me. But I don't know the answer to that.
The Buffett rule is there.
Well, my assistant is called Debbie Bosani, and so it's the Bosonic rule around the office.
Yeah, and I know and love her.
Yeah,
you know.
You should.
And there's also this, though. I mean, what is interesting, and this has come up in this conversation, and it's about a life or it's about a financial doings. You don't want to go right where the line is. You want to play in the middle of the field.
Sure.
And you don't want to do things that if they ended up on the front page of the New York Times,
Absolutely.
your life would be ruined.
Absolutely.
As you say, you can build a reputation for 20 years and you can destroy it in one moment.
Yeah, and the United States almost did that here recently.
Yeah. But you're optimistic about the country because of the innovation, because of the resources, mainly because of the human capital.
Just look at the last 237 years. I mean, when is it paid to bet against America over any time? 237 years. You know, people say, well, you're betting on America. Well, who wants to bet against it? I mean, just look at the record. And we haven't come close to tapping our human potential. No, this country's best days lie ahead of us.
Tapping our human potential because science is moving forward so fast and every other kind of way.
Everything.
Now, here's the other interesting thing about your dad, who, as you know, I've had many, many conversations with. IBM, you made an investment in IBM. Right. Notwithstanding the fact that you'd always said, I don't want to invest in things that have to do with technology that I might not understand. Yeah. They seem to have run into a rough patch, too.
Well, I'm sure Jenny Rometty's disappointed with some aspects of this year, but they're going to earn more this year. They're going to earn more money this year than they've ever earned,
and it
for
has
sure.
to do with orders from China, I suspect.
Some of it, yeah, but they will have record per share earnings this year. You know, that can be disappointing if you expected more, but it is not a bad record, believe me.
Yeah. And, I mean, this is a good place to talk in this conversation about that, which is that, you know, you didn't invest in IBM because what you thought they might do and the stock price might do in the next quarter or the next quarter, the next quarter. You had to look at the fundamentals of the business and say they're on the right track.
I don't know what IBM earned in the third quarter of 1927 or 1962 or 19. I mean, in the end, every company, including Berkshire, you know, we've had a fair number of blips over time. Right. But if we do the right things, we'll get the right result over time. And we are fortunate to be operating in the best country in the world. We got a tailwind.
And so does your son. 40 chances, and your grandson, with the forward by you, with references to your wife and your mother and your grandmother, finding hope in a hungry world. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Great to have you back.
Nice to be back.
Thank you, Warren.
Thanks, Charlie.
Back in a moment. Stay with us.